The classroom was alive with the sound of clashing metal and rapid footsteps. Students at the Vanguard Combat Academy moved with precision, their training weapons humming with energy. Every swing, every step, and every dodge was monitored by hovering drones and strict instructors. Yet amid the calculated chaos, one student struggled to keep pace. "I can't do this," muttered Jarek, wiping sweat from his brow. He was tall and strong, but his movements lacked the grace and speed the instructors demanded. Across the room, the other students trained with fluidity that almost looked like dance. "Focus, Jarek," called Instructor Marin, a stern woman with sharp eyes. "Combat is not about brute strength, it's about awareness and reaction. Move faster, predict your opponent." Jarek gritted his teeth and lunged forward, but he stumbled again, sending his practice blaster skidding across the floor. A few students snickered quietly. Just then, the double doors at the far end of the room hissed open. A figure stepped inside, and the room froze. She was tall, with a lean, athletic build. Her dark armor glimmered under the academy's lights, and a small, sleek weapon rested at her hip. But it wasn't her armor or weapon that drew everyone's attention. It was her calm, confident presence. She walked slowly, scanning the room, and her eyes were sharp, calculating. "Who's that?" whispered a student beside Jarek. "No idea," replied another, voice low. "But I've heard stories. She's supposed to be unstoppable." The instructors stiffened. One of them, Commander Halrick, exchanged a quick glance with Marin. "She's early for the advanced trial," he said, almost to himself. The woman stopped at the center of the room. She didn't look nervous, didn't look impressed. She just looked ready. The students couldn't help but notice the small smirk that tugged at her lips, like she already knew something they didn't. Jarek, trying to regain some pride, straightened up. "Hey," he called out. "You're new here, right? Think you can handle the training?" The woman tilted her head slightly, the smirk widening just a fraction. Without answering, she reached for her weapon and performed a smooth, almost casual check of the energy load. Every movement was precise. Every gesture carried confidence. "I can handle it," she said finally, voice calm but firm. "And I don't need to prove it by talking." A ripple of whispers went through the classroom. The other students looked at each other, unsure what to make of her. She didn't beg for attention, but somehow she had it. "You think too much," Jarek muttered under his breath, stepping forward. He wanted to show that he wasn't intimidated. "We'll see if your skills match your attitude." The woman's smirk didn't falter. She simply raised an eyebrow and loaded the next energy cartridge into her weapon. The sound was soft, almost inaudible, but it carried across the room. The student's eyes widened. That small, deliberate movement said something loud. "Don't underestimate me." Jarek's hands shook slightly as he gripped his own weapon. He had trained for years, but something about her presence unsettled him. He tried to focus, tried to think of his strategy, but the room felt smaller somehow, and the air heavier. "Ready?" he said, forcing a grin. The woman didn't move. She just watched him. Her eyes followed every twitch of his muscles, every nervous glance he gave. It was like she could see inside his mind, like she already knew his next move. "Yeah, I'm ready," Jarek said, louder this time. He lunged forward, hoping to catch her off guard. In an instant, she moved. Not quickly, not frantically, but with absolute precision. 5 seconds. That's all it took. She sidestepped, ducked, and positioned herself behind him. Her weapon pressed, gently against his back. The room went silent. Even the instructors didn't breathe. Jarek froze, stunned. He hadn't even realized how fast she had moved. He wanted to shout, to struggle, but he was already neutralized. 5 seconds, she said softly, almost teasingly, still smirking. "Try not to repeat that mistake." She released him and stepped back, as if nothing had happened. Jarek sank to his knees, heart pounding, sweat dripping from his forehead. His classmates stared in disbelief. Some were awed, some were terrified. I don't understand," Jarek stammered. How did you..." She interrupted him with a simple shake of her head. You moved too predictably. I didn't need strength. I needed observation. She glanced around the classroom, eyes sharp. Combat isn't about showing off, it's about reading, reacting, and adapting, remember that. The instructors stepped forward, nodding in approval. Well done, said Commander Halrick. She's exceptional, and not just in skill. She teaches without saying a word. The woman gave a small bow, still smiling faintly. Then, without another word, she turned and walked toward the exit. The room remained silent for a long moment, the students frozen in awe. Finally, someone whispered, She's human? Yes, replied another, eyes wide. And that's exactly why we need to pay attention. Humans are unpredictable. Jarek stayed on the floor, hands trembling. The lesson had been harsh but clear. Underestimating a human, even one who looked calm, casual, or smirking, was a dangerous mistake. He realized for the first time that skill was nothing without awareness, and courage alone could not protect him. The woman disappeared through the double doors, leaving the hum of the classroom machinery and the stunned silence in her wake. The students exchanged glances, realizing their training had just begun, but that their expectations had already been shattered. Somewhere, in the back of the room, Instructor Marin allowed herself a small smile. Humanity had a way of surprising everyone, even in a room full of trained fighters. And this student, this mysterious new arrival, was about to prove why humans were feared across the stars. The morning sun streamed through the wide windows of the Academy's main training hall. The room was vast, filled with holographic targets, floating drones, and obstacle courses designed to push even the best students to their limits. The new student, the one who had walked in with the confident smirk, stood calmly at one end of the hall. Her eyes scanned the room, reading the positions of every trainee. Nothing moved past her unnoticed. Her presence alone drew whispers from everyone in the room. Jarek, still humiliated from their previous encounter, clenched his fists. He was not the type to let a lesson like that go unanswered. Pride burned in his chest and the desire to prove himself flared. You got lucky last time, he muttered under his breath. I won't make that mistake again. She tilted her head slightly but said nothing. Her smirk remained, small and confident, as though she already knew what he was thinking. The head instructor, Commander Halrick, noticed the tension. He raised a hand. Today you will demonstrate your abilities in controlled duels. No lethal force. We want skill, awareness, and adaptability. The students quickly formed pairs. Jarek stomped toward her, ignoring the hesitant glances from his classmates. He raised his weapon, a sleek training blaster, and pointed it directly at her. Ready? He said, voice tense. She nodded once, slow and calm. I'm ready. The moment the signal sounded, Jarek lunged. He moved faster than before, forcing himself to remember his training. He aimed, shot, and tried to anticipate her moves. But the second he took that first step, she reacted. It was like watching a shadow move. She didn't dodge in a single frantic leap. She shifted, pivoted, and sidestepped almost effortlessly. Every motion was economical, precise, and smooth. In less than 5 seconds, she had disarmed him, sending his blaster skittering across the floor and held a hand gently on his shoulder to steady him. The room went silent. Every student froze, jaws dropping. Even the instructors looked impressed, though none spoke. Jarek blinked rapidly, unable to comprehend what had just happened. How did you do that? He gasped. She smiled faintly. You moved with what I expected. You tried to force an outcome instead of observing me. Combat is about awareness, not speed or strength alone. He stumbled back, rubbing his shoulder, embarrassed. Around him, students whispered excitedly. Some glanced at her with awe. Others looked nervous, suddenly questioning their own skills. Commander Halrick stepped forward. Notice something, everyone? He asked. Humans, when trained properly, can read situations and adapt in ways that seem impossible. Observe, learn, and respect that ability. The woman didn't look at him. Instead, she scanned the room again, noticing another student practicing too close to the edge of a balance platform. With a quick, subtle movement, she positioned herself behind him, guiding him back safely with just a touch. No words, no warning. The student froze, confused and impressed. "It's not just strength," she said quietly, as if to herself. "It's timing, prediction, and restraint." Jarek, still recovering, gritted his teeth. "This isn't fair," he muttered. You're too fast, too smart." She looked at him, her eyes sharp. "Fairness doesn't exist in combat. Preparation and observation do. That's why humans survive where others fail. That's why we endure, adapt, and overcome." The students around them listened, their curiosity growing. Whispers spread. "She's incredible. She's human? How can one person do that?" One of the instructors, a young woman named Lyra, approached and nodded toward the new student. "She shows us what humans can really do, not by brute force but by intelligence, focus, and instinct." Jarek, humiliated and frustrated, stepped forward again. "I'll get it right this time," he said, determination. The academy's calm atmosphere was shattered that evening. Alarms blared, red lights flashed, and the hum of hovering drones filled the air. The students froze, unsure what had triggered the emergency. "Attention!" Commander Halrich's voice echoed through the hall. "We have a rogue AI intruder in the lower training levels. All students evacuate immediately. Instructors contain the threat." Chaos erupted. Students scrambled for safety, some panicking, others trying to protect their gear. The AI's voice echoed through the corridors, cold, mechanical, and mocking. "Intruders detected. Engaging protocols. Neutralize human threat." Jarek's heart pounded. He had trained for drills, for duels, for controlled combat, but never for real danger. He glanced around, looking for the woman who had already stunned the entire class with her skill. She stood near the hall entrance, calm and collected, her weapon at the ready. Her smirk returned, calm and confident, as if she had expected this. "Stay behind me," she said softly, though firmly, to Jarek and a few others who had frozen in fear. "Watch, learn, and survive. Humans adapt. That is our strength." The AI moved swiftly, sending robotic drones into the corridors to intercept anyone who approached. They were precise, fast, and relentless, designed to neutralize any threat. Yet the woman did not flinch. She observed, calculating, anticipating each movement. The first drone lunged at her. She sidestepped, used its momentum against it, and sent it crashing into a wall. The second drone fired its energy beams, but she rolled aside, keeping her distance and keeping calm. Within seconds, she had disarmed and disabled 3 more drones, each move measured, deliberate, and efficient. The students watched in awe. This was no training exercise. This was life and death. Yet she moved as if it were another lesson. Every dodge, every counterattack, every movement demonstrated human intelligence, creativity, and instinct in action. Jarek felt his fear slowly replaced by determination. He had seen her fight, and he understood now. Humans did not need to overpower opponents. They survived by adapting, observing, and thinking faster than their enemies. The AI's drones advanced in a coordinated attack. "Humans are inefficient," the AI intoned. "Prediction algorithms indicate 93% probability of failure." The woman smirked faintly. "That's your problem. You calculate, you predict, you follow patterns. Humans are not patterns. We adapt." She leaped onto a nearby platform, using it as cover and a vantage point. She analyzed the drones, noting weak points, movement patterns, and firing sequences. Then, with a calm precision that left the students breathless, she acted. A 5-second sequence unfolded like a perfectly timed dance. She rolled, leapt, and struck in ways that neutralized the drones one by one. Each movement was not random. It was calculated in real time, responding to every unexpected action the AI attempted. One of the students gasped. She's doing it again, just like before." Indeed, in mere seconds she had turned chaos into control. Her smirk, calm and confident, reminded everyone why humans were feared across the galaxy. The AI adjusted, sending a larger, more heavily armed drone toward her. It moved faster, fired more accurately, and seemed almost unstoppable. Jarek instinctively readied himself. She can't do it alone, he thought, panic rising for a moment. But then he remembered her lesson. Humans adapt, observe, and react. Not panic, not rush, adapt. Watching closely, he noticed the pattern. The drone paused slightly before firing each time. It overcorrected when dodging. Its sensors focused too much on her movements. "Follow my lead," she said to Jarek, calm as ever. "Watch carefully." With that, she drew the drone's attention with a series of feints, rolling and moving as if to attack, but always staying just out of reach. Jarek saw the weak points she was exploiting. Small exposed circuits, delays in reaction, predictable targeting algorithms. Then, in one synchronized motion, she struck. Her weapon fired a precise, non-lethal shot that disabled the drone instantly. It crashed, sparks flying. The other drones paused, seemingly reassessing the situation. "Humans never follow the rules of expectation," she said, smirking. "That is why we survive." Jarek and the remaining students moved carefully, following her lead, learning how to think and react under pressure. Together, they cleared the remaining drones with minimal effort, guided by her insight and calm. Strategy. When the last drone fell, the academy was silent except for the low hum of damaged machinery. Commander Halrick stepped forward, impressed. "Remarkable. The threat is neutralized and no lives lost. This is exactly what we train for. Humans, when properly trained, adapt, survive, and overcome any challenge." The students looked at the woman with awe and newfound respect. She had turned what could have been disaster into a lesson in human ingenuity, creativity, and courage. Jarek approached her, still catching his breath. I don't know how you do it," he said honestly. "You make it look easy, but it's incredible." She smiled faintly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "It's not magic," she said. "It's observation, thinking ahead, and reacting quickly. Humans survive by adapting. That is our greatest weapon. Remember it." The academy resumed its calm, but the lesson had been learned. Every student. The training hall was quiet once. More. The rogue AI threat had been neutralized, the drones disabled, and the students were beginning to understand the true meaning of the day's events. The air was heavy with awe, respect, and a newfound awareness of human potential. Jarek sat against a wall, exhausted but thoughtful. His pride had been humbled countless times over the past days, yet each lesson had left him stronger, not physically, but mentally. He had seen in action what humans could accomplish when they combined intelligence, observation, and adaptability. The woman who had transformed their understanding of combat stood at the center of the hall, her weapon slung casually at her side. Her calm presence drew the attention of everyone still present. The faint smirk that had become her signature seemed to glow with quiet confidence. "Today was not about winning or losing," she said, her voice steady, carrying through the hall. "It was about learning, about understanding what it means to survive, to adapt, and to think beyond brute force. Humans succeed not because we are the strongest, but because we are clever, resourceful, and relentless when it matters most." The students nodded, many still catching their breath. Jarek stood, feeling the weight of his own mistakes and the potential of what he could become. He approached her cautiously, unsure of how to express the mix of respect, awe, and determination. He felt, I understand now," he said quietly. "It's not about strength or speed. It's about awareness, adapting, and reacting, right?" She looked at him, her smirk softening into a faint, approving smile. "Exactly. You have to observe first, anticipate second, and act decisively. Strength and skill are tools, but your mind and your instincts are your true weapons. That is why humans survive, and why we are feared across the galaxy." Jarek's eyes shone with determination. "I want to be like that. I want to learn to think and react like you." She nodded once. "You will, if you commit. But it takes more than desire. It takes discipline, patience, and the willingness to fail and learn from every mistake. Remember this lesson well. The other students, who had watched quietly, began to approach. They too wanted to understand, to learn, to become stronger in the ways humans excel. One by one they asked questions, observed her stance, her movements, and listened to her guidance. Instructor Marin stepped forward, smiling proudly. You've all witnessed something extraordinary today. Humans are not the strongest species in the galaxy, but we are resilient, intelligent, and adaptable. That is why we survive where others fail, and why we are respected and feared. Take these lessons to heart. The students nodded solemnly, absorbing the wisdom of the day. Even the elite trainees who had once been overconfident understood the magnitude of what they had witnessed. Humans were unpredictable, clever, and capable of turning impossible situations to their advantage. Jarek stayed close to the woman, still processing everything. You make it look easy, he admitted. She shook her head gently. It's never easy. Every move, every decision, every reaction comes from experience and focus. What you saw today is the result of countless trials, failures, and successes. That is the reality of survival for humans. He realized finally that her smirk was not arrogance. It was confidence born from experience. It was the quiet assurance of someone who had faced impossible odds and come out alive. Not just by strength, but by cleverness, adaptability, and courage. Commander Halrick cleared his throat. Take a moment to reflect, everyone. The lessons you've learned today will stay with you far longer than any training manual or drill. Observe, adapt, and never understood that strength alone was not enough. Intelligence, awareness, and adaptability were what made humans formidable, feared, and respected. As the sun set beyond the academy walls, the woman walked away, her smirk still faint but powerful. She had proven, once again, why humans were unpredictable and unstoppable. Her presence left the students. The training hall had never been this quiet. Students still whispered about the new arrival. The woman whose presence seemed to bend time and space in combat. Her movements were precise, her reactions flawless. Humans, they realized, were not predictable, and she was living proof. Commander Halrick stepped forward, clearing his throat. Today, he announced, we raise the challenge. One against many. You will face 3 opponents at once. Observe your surroundings, anticipate moves, and adapt. Remember, this is controlled combat, no lethal force. The woman nodded calmly. Understood, she said, her voice soft but firm. She adjusted her armor, checked her weapon, and moved to the center of the hall. 3 elite students stepped forward. They were fast, skilled, and confident. Their eyes narrowed at her, sizing her up, ready to show their abilities. Jarek watched nervously from the sidelines, still humbled from his previous encounters. Begin, Halrick shouted. The 3 students lunged simultaneously, each attacking from a different direction. Most people would be overwhelmed, but she didn't panic. She shifted her weight slightly, moving with a quiet grace that made it hard to track. Her speed. She sidestepped the first attacker, using his momentum to throw him off balance. Then she pivoted, catching the second student's wrist mid-strike and lightly tapped him, signaling the hit. She moved again, fluidly, and avoided the third student's kick. All 3 froze, confused. None could predict her movements. She wasn't just fast, she was aware. Every gesture, every shift of balance, every glance of their eyes was accounted for. She reacted to more than their attacks. She reacted to their intention. Jarek held his breath. He had trained for years, but watching her made him feel inexperienced. She wasn't relying on brute strength. She was using her brain, her instincts, and her experience to control the situation. The students pressed harder, coordinating their attacks, but she moved like water, flowing around them, slipping past defenses, and redirecting every force they used against themselves. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. A minute passed, yet none of them landed a single clean hit. You see? She said softly, almost to herself. Predictable patterns are easy to exploit. Awareness is everything. The room was tense. The instructors watched closely, exchanging impressed looks. Humans had always been clever, but this was beyond clever. It was instinct, strategy, and raw adaptability all at once. Commander Halric called out, "Hold!" The duel paused. The three elite students stepped back, breathing heavily, sweating. They were frustrated, but there was awe in their eyes. "You all underestimated her," Halric said. "Humans can process information in real time, predict outcomes, and adapt. That is why we train them so hard. That is why they survive where others fail." The woman straightened, smoothing her armor. "It's not about being stronger," she explained. "It's about thinking faster, moving smarter, and reacting before your opponent completes their move. Humans survive because we adapt, not because we overpower." A young student in the back whispered to another, "She's human?" "Yes," the other replied. "And this is why humans are respected across the galaxy. We cannot predict them. We cannot calculate them fully. They will always surprise us." The three elite students stepped forward again, humbled but determined. They wanted to understand her, to learn her method, to survive the next round. She smiled faintly, as if inviting them to try, yet warning them of the consequences. The duel resumed. This time the students coordinated more carefully, each attack measured, each strike deliberate. She responded the same way, but now she began to teach without words. She blocked in a way that corrected mistakes, guided movements without harming, and redirected attacks to show openings. Jarek noticed something important. Every time she acted, she gave lessons in human combat philosophy. Adapt, anticipate, and never panic. She didn't just defeat, she taught through action. Minutes passed and the elite students could barely land a touch. Every attempt to overpower her failed, yet she remained calm, collected, and precise. Even the instructors couldn't help but step closer, observing the display of human skill. Finally, Halric raised his hand. "Enough," he shouted. The students stepped back, exhausted, but wiser. Their eyes followed her as she slowly walked to the center of the hall. "Remember this," she said, her voice firm, carrying across the hall. "You train to survive, not to show off. Humans succeed because we think, adapt, and act decisively. Predictability is a weakness. Awareness is power. Strength comes last." The students nodded, still trying to process what had just happened. The three elite trainees, humbled, looked at her with respect. She had defeated them all without a single strike that truly harmed. Her victories were mental, strategic, and precise. Jarek, still catching his breath, realized something. This was why humans were feared, not because of their size or strength, but because of their minds, instincts, and courage under pressure. She was a living example of that truth. Commander Halric stepped forward. "You've all seen what humans can do when they combine skill, intelligence, and awareness. Let today remind you why humans are respected across the galaxy. Adaptability is the greatest weapon, and she has shown it to you firsthand." The woman smirked faintly, the same smirk that had left Jarek stunned the first day. She looked around, the hall, then toward the exit. "This is only the beginning," she said softly. "Learn, observe, and be ready. You never know when you'll need every second, every thought, and every decision." With that, she walked out, leaving a hall full of students and instructors in awe. Even the seasoned veterans of the academy understood something new about humans. They were clever, unpredictable, and unstoppable when they mastered awareness and action. Jarek sank to the floor again, humbled but inspired. He had not only lost in combat, he had learned something far more valuable. Humans survived because they adapted. They didn't just fight. They thought, calculated, and reacted. And one day, he vowed, he would learn to be like her. The students whispered among themselves, sharing their thoughts. Every one of them realized the same thing. The woman had shown the true power of humans. Not strength, not speed, but intelligence, awareness, and adaptability. That lesson would not be forgotten. And somewhere beyond the training hall, the smirk lingered, calm and confident. A human had walked into the academy and in doing so had reminded everyone why humanity was respected and feared across the stars. The training hall had quieted after the intense duels, but the whispers and stunned expressions lingered. Students were still replaying the events in their minds, trying to understand how one person could move so quickly, think so clearly, and remain so calm under pressure. Jarek sat in a corner, head resting in his hands. He couldn't stop thinking about her, how effortlessly she had outmatched everyone in the hall. Her movements were precise, her decisions perfect, yet there was something more. It wasn't just training. It was instinct, experience, and something deeper. He glanced at Instructor Marin, who had been watching silently, arms crossed. "Who is she?" he asked softly. "Where does a human like that come from?" Marin hesitated. She had been an instructor at the academy for years, but even she was amazed by the woman's abilities. "She's a survivor," Marin said finally, "trained in situations most people would never endure. You will learn more about her soon. For now, just understand this. Humans are clever because we are adaptable, and she is a perfect example." Jarek frowned. "Adaptable? I've trained my whole life and I couldn't even land a hit on her." Marin smiled faintly. "That's because skill alone is not enough. Combat is more than strength or speed. It's timing, observation, and instinct. She has honed all of these under circumstances you can hardly imagine." As the students slowly began cleaning up the training hall, a flashback began to take shape in Yarek's mind. He imagined her past, piecing together stories he had heard from instructors, whispers in the corridors, and the aura she carried. Years ago, she had been deployed on a death world, a planet so harsh and unforgiving that only the strongest survived. The air was thick with toxins, the terrain jagged and deadly, and the wildlife was designed to kill anything weaker than itself. Humans had colonized many planets, but surviving a death world mission was reserved for the most elite. There, she had learned to rely not on sheer strength, but on her mind. Every move had to be calculated, every reaction anticipated. A single mistake could cost her life. She had also trained in covert operations across hostile alien territories. Outnumbered and outgunned, she had survived missions that others considered impossible. Her success was not luck. It was observation, preparation, and the ability to adapt instantly. Back in the academy, Jarek realized that everything he had witnessed in the training hall made sense now. Her smirk, her calm movements, her precise strikes. They were the result of survival in extreme situations. "Humans are more than they seem," Marin said, noticing Jarek's thoughtful expression. "We survive because we adapt and we fight smart, not just hard. That is why she is here and why she challenges you." Suddenly the woman appeared again at the training hall entrance. She had been observing quietly, listening to the whispers, and now she walked in, her smirk familiar and calm.